The Seattle Seahawks offseason in 60 seconds hired Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator, John Benton as their offensive line coach, signed Sam Darnold 3 years, $100 million, $52 guaranteed, signed Cooper Kupp 3 years, $45 million, $17 guaranteed, DeMarcus Lawrence 3 years, $32 million, $18 guaranteed, extended Ernest Jones 3 years, $28 million, $15 guaranteed, extended Jaron Reed 3 years, $22 million, $10 million guaranteed, traded Geno Smith to the Raiders, traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers, lost Draymond Jones, Roy Robertson Harris in free agency, released Tyler Lockett, drafted Gray Zabel, offensive lineman in the first round, safety Nick Emenwari in the second round, 35th overall, traded up to do that. Tight end Elijah Arroyo in the second round, 50th overall, and quarterback Jalen Milroe, third round, 92nd overall. We had to rotate off who was the auctioneer for our fantasy draft this year because we couldn't find one.
Oh.
And I really liked it. Everyone in the league was giving me you're enjoying this way too much, and I was like, I am kind of liking it. So the off seasons in 60 seconds allow me to tap into my auctioneer DNA that I'm really trying to cultivate over here.
You've got the reps though. Who would have knew that was your other calling?
Let's get to what we're excited to watch for the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. We all had a pretty similar answer to this one. Derek, how do you want to frame this?
I mean, if everything goes right and we get the same jump that we've seen from Mike Macdonald before, it might be the best defense in the league. And I know I feel like a broken record because I've said that for probably 4 teams at this point, but that's kind of how defense goes, right?
Correct. You can do that. There can be a short list of candidates for that. That's okay.
Because with offense, it's the quarterback kind of makes it easier to be a little bit more solidified with that. But with defense, it really is you go in with 5 or 6 ideas. And I think that Seattle is every bit as good as a lot of those teams, especially I think they are maybe a smidgen less uber talented as some of the other teams. But I just trust Mike Macdonald so much and just what he's been able to do over the last 3 years that whatever little quirks they needed to work out going into this year, I'm pretty confident they're going to be able to get that stuff ready.
Yeah, you didn't bring Mike Macdonald in to develop a quarterback or teach a scheme or any of the offensive side of the ball stuff. You brought him in to build a badass defense. And on paper, anyway, he has the personality to do it. He's got some demons on that side of the ball. And it's hard not to think about the jump the Ravens made in his second year as their defensive coordinator. It's year 2. The guys that have been there know the scheme. There's a lot of new talent on that side of the ball. It's very exciting to think about the potential of this defense.
And I think before we dig in even further, one thing I would say about Mike Macdonald is we've already seen him both in Baltimore and in Seattle, get the best out of players immediately. I think Roquan Smith probably played the best ball that he's ever played under Mike Macdonald. Leonard Williams has probably played the best ball that he's ever played under Mike Macdonald. So the fact that he's already gotten that from a number of guys who have been good, but not great yet, I think speaks to what he might be able to get out of some of these other guys.
When you look at what they were in the back half of last season, they finished top 5 in EPA per drop back from weeks 10 through 18. And the thing that I think is even more important than that, they finished 8th in defensive rushing success rate in the back half of last year. And that was the thing where in the first half of the season, they had absolutely no shot. And so after they traded for Ernest Jones and settled in a little bit, I think he's been somebody, the coaches in Seattle noticed the difference when he got there, and the coaches in Tennessee noticed the difference when he left. I think he has been a settling force for the teams that he has been on over the last couple seasons, and you have seen that in the results. And Dave, you mentioning the transition from year 1 to year 2 for Macdonald in Baltimore, I think that we may see something similar here. And you look at it, and Mike Macdonald is this guy who I think is kind of tabbed as this mad scientist, wunderkind guy on defense compared to the young guys on offense in his division, right? He's supposed to be the McVay and Shanahan guy on the defensive side of the ball. It's part of the reason he got the job. And with those guys, I think we always kind of envision them on the attack, on the attack, on the attack. And Mike Macdonald does kind of take that mindset to defense. Sometimes, when you are trying to figure out your offensive game plan, how you're calling plays, the thought is, okay, based on this formation, this personnel grouping, these sorts of tendencies, I'm going to do these calls in order to attack their weaknesses here. And you talk to coaches that have coached with Mike Macdonald, and he kind of takes that to on the defensive side, where he's using all of these tendencies to kind of put you in the perfect play based on all of that information. But the one area where I do think it's a little bit different mindset-wise is that I think the first year in Baltimore, based on how the first month of that year went, and even last year a little bit, he's still a defensive coach who is trying to mitigate risk, right? You're trying to make sure that the downside is not quite as bad as you want it to be. And in Baltimore, I think the most important transition that he had as a coach was that he went from calling the defense in order to limit mistakes to calling the defense through the players in order to maximize opportunities. And that requires getting your feet wet a little bit and establishing a baseline, but it also requires getting to know those players a little bit more. And I think that is the process that has happened over the past year or so in Seattle. So you go from a limiting downside mindset to a how can I get the most out of the ceiling mindset. And I think that is going to be the most important transition that we see for the Seahawks defense this year.
Yeah, I think these defensive guys, especially like Mike McDonald, just like they want to. I think because he calls a defense that is so I need to be in the right play and need to be perfect. Like you said, he needs to set himself a baseline to know like what is going to screw me instead of just like throwing everything at the wall. And then like I think that becomes a little bit jumbled. And some defensive coordinators are okay living in that. I mean, the Ravens themselves did it for a long time with Wink Martindale. But Mike McDonald is very much the opposite of that, where I think he's trying to start with the few things that work and then expand from there instead of throwing a million things at the wall and trying to whittle it down.
And I think too, like you just mentioned, Robert, like when you trade for Ernest Jones midseason because it's so bad that you need a stabilizing force, trust is obviously a big part of this. And I've got to imagine the trust factor is through the roof in August of year 2, as opposed to midway through a first year that, at least for the first half of the season, was not working at all.
And you just look at this defense personnel wise. Derek, you mentioned that maybe there isn't quite the star level talent that we've seen on like the Baltimore defense, all of that, the truly kind of difference making season defining defenses. There are also no real weak links on this defense.
Yeah.
Like maybe a second outside corner you're a little bit worried about. And if Emanwari is going to be their primary nickel player, which we'll talk about in a second, and he's decent from the start, their worst starter is Tyrese Knight in that situation. And I actually thought that Tyrese Knight was okay last year as a rookie. And so there just aren't that many weak links on this team. So if you combine that, where you have a floor positionally, with a couple of these younger pieces, which we'll hit on, taking a step and kind of asserting themselves as those difference-making players, I think that's when you can really start cooking with gas. And this isn't theoretical. Like, again, this was like a top 5 defense by a lot of metrics over the second half of last season. So the proof is there. Like, we have seen what they can be at their best, and I expect them to continue on that trajectory.
Yeah, and like even the Tyrese Knight thing, again, young player showed some stuff at the end of last year, but when it's almost a little bit of the Roquan Smith thing where it's like, well, when you're a young linebacker playing next to someone who is that put together, you have some degree of like he might be able to develop in a nice way for us.
Let's talk about the swing points with the 2025 Seattle Seahawks. Mine for this is essentially just whether their bet on the offensive identity change is ultimately going to work. And you look at what the offense was last year, Derek, compared to what the offense is now, it couldn't be more different. And I think that was the point, is that you go from a system under Ryan Grubb where the pass and run games are completely divorced from one another. There's absolutely no cohesion between them, to a system where there's as much cohesion as possible because of what the play action game is supposed to be within this offense. And the number that I would throw out that I think really kind of illustrates this: no offense in the NFL last season played more snaps against base defense than the New Orleans Saints. It was 500 snaps. Seattle was 30th.
Wow. That completely tracks.
That's amazing. That is such good whiplash, and it makes sense if you watched those teams play.
They have 2 fullbacks on the roster.
They sure do.
Two.
What
I
a
was gonna
different
mention that
world they're
later.
living in.
The Saints last year finished 31st in 11 personnel usage. It was 33% of their plays. That's what we're looking at here. And the hope is that that sort of identity change and structural change, along with adding a Gray Zabel, we'll see what happens at center. Like, I think that Jalen Sundell has actually had some really nice moments in the preseason. So I do think that the personnel is going to be better up front. But even if the personnel wasn't necessarily better, I think that what the system is and how that asks a little bit less of the line, it was always going to be better. And so if the run game can really click because of Zabel and the changes in the interior and the system, and you're protecting the offensive lineman a little bit more, even if there's a slight concern about a mild downgrade at quarterback, however we want to see this, the bet overall might be enough to just change everything about the way that the Seattle Seahawks offense feels week in and week out.
And it's very funny to see how encouraging just a month of preseason football has been, because when they signed Sam Darnold, and didn't do a whole lot else in free agency. I remember being confused to the point of almost angry, where I was like, hey, Gino had to work miracles to keep himself alive here. What do you think Sam Darnold's going to do? Then they draft Gray Zabel, and you're like, all right, like, yes, I like that. That's better. But 18th overall pick, FCS player, like, how much difference is one guy going to make? Then you get to August and watch Gray Zabel play, and you're like, I like this. This is really nice. Like, he looks phenomenal. Maybe if you get some better health from your offensive tackles, obviously Charles Cross and Abe Lucas both had their struggles last year with injury, among other things. All of a sudden, and I think you just took me to another level, Robert. Like, when you mentioned that part of it, like just the structural change of this offense, I'm already daydreaming about this being such a better offensive line than I thought it was going to be in March.
I think that's
I
fair. I don't think that's crazy to imagine.
Yeah, my thing with this offense is like I think the offensive line could be better by virtue of what they're doing with the new scheme and all that stuff, and obviously adding Gray Zabel. And I can envision the world where Sam Darnold is okay, because I actually think that there are parts of last year that felt kind of real to me. Like in the way that you were kind of talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, like I think Sam Darnold is good at just like go 1 to 2 to 3, and if you see someone open, just chuck it, bud. And he did a really good job at that. And he has an incredible arm to fit some of those windows, even if he's like a smidgen late. I thought he did better at like reading the blitz and handling the blitz than I thought Sam Darnold was ever going to. Like he was 14th in the league last year, according to NFL Pro, against the blitz, which is not spectacular by any means, but is totally solid. And so if we're operating under the idea that it's a similar-ish system, I think he could do something similar there. The problem to me is that even though I think Sam Darnold proved to some degree that he can play NFL quarterback, he also plays it in a very particular way. And what I mean by that is he's going to hold the ball for an extremely long time. And in Minnesota, that was okay, because even though the offensive line was shaky, you always had Justin Jefferson down there somewhere. You always had Jordan Addison down there somewhere. And while I like some of the pass catchers here in Seattle, mostly JSN, they're not Justin Jefferson. They are not Jordan Addison. To me, it's just a very different thing. Like, nobody got more EPA per dropback on deep throws last year than Sam Darnold. If that drops down to even average in this offense, and then all the other parts of quarterbacking really become more prominent for Sam, I wonder a little bit what that looks like.
That brings me to what's keeping me up at night, because my keeping me up at night is the pass catchers outside JSN and where this team finds
Yeah.
explosive plays. In talking to people there and just, thinking about explosive offenses in the NFL and what they typically look like, there are examples of explosive offenses in the NFL that don't necessarily have a burner as part of the equation. You look at Buffalo, you look at Baltimore, and what they've been able to do without that like turbocharged piece as part of the equation. And this team just released MVS, right? Like there is not a lot of speed here, depending on what you're considering you might get out of Torrey Horton. The argument was that, well, there are offenses that do it, right? Baltimore does it. Buffalo does it. Well, they have Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And so where this team finds explosive plays, that is going to be my question. I think the JSN is underrated as a vertical receiver, just because I do think on some of those like drifts and kind of intermediate in cuts and even like corner routes and stuff like that, the way he moves is really interesting. Talking to Sam Darnold when I was there, we were talking about this, and he was like, it's almost like he's playing on skates. Like his ability to kind of move at full speed and change direction is kind of incredible. And so I do think that he has more explosive potential than how we normally think about JSN as a quote unquote slot receiver. My question is, outside of him, where are those plays coming from?
That's kind of the question.
I was curious about this. I went and looked at Next Gen's like mile per hour stats where they like track player speed, which you're absolutely right, Robert. Like JSN, of course he's not like Tyreek Hill, but like he's got plenty of juice. Like
He's got plenty of giddy up. Plenty.
Yeah. He had 35 routes last year where he reached 18 miles per hour, which puts him right in line with like DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase. Like he ain't the fastest guy in the league, but he can do the job. Now, do you want to know how many times Cooper Kupp did that?
0.
It's
a handful.
he got there 9 times.
Okay.
9 times. So, yeah, that is the problem. And yeah, you mentioned Torrey Horton. I think that's worth bringing up, but a 5th round rookie who had an exciting training camp is not who you want to be relying on for extra juice. And I'm with you. I think JSN is plenty good enough. He's a great yak receiver too, by the way. 44% of his yards came after the catch. Awesome. But I would like a little bit more. The running backs, as good as I think that they can be, they're not really known for being explosive players either. Charbonnet's explosive run rate was 11.9%. Kenneth Walker's was 8.5. Charbonnet's is a little bit better, but you're still not talking about big play guys. So
I expect
I
Kenneth
think-
Walker to
I think-
potentially be that big play guy this year in better circumstances.
Walker can
that
be.
Kenneth
is
He
a
just-
Walker-
valid point.
If Kenneth Walker isn't getting, so last year, the Seahawks, let me look up the number. I was just looking it up while we were talking. Finished 29th in the percentage of their runs that went for 0 or negative yards last year. The amount of times they're getting hit in the backfield on this team last season was just disgusting. And so if we can have a little bit better of a rushing ecosystem for Kenneth Walker, he is an explosive player if you put him in the right situation. And so I'm a little bit more bullish on that. But the pass catchers, it's like, I don't think you have to have explosive pass catchers to be a very good or efficient passing offense. And I do think a system that's built around JSN, Cooper Kupp, where neither of them are really outside receivers because of the condensed formations you're playing with. Neither of them are slot receivers because you're playing in a lot of 12 personnel. Elijah Arroyo and AJ Barner, I think you can make that work, but it requires real precision from the quarterback in a way that we have not really had to see him play, Derek. And so I think that is the bridge that we're going to have to cross here if we're going to get the best version of the Seahawks offense.
That's exactly like guys like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and even TJ Hawkinson when he looked decent last year just give you so much more room for error than I think Sam is going to have this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it. Like the margin for error is limited when you aren't creating explosive plays. And can they be consistently efficient with this pass catching group? I do think that they're going to use a ton of play action. They're going to use a ton of keepers. They're going to try to manufacture these sorts of down the field plays in ways that we've seen other teams without a lot of top end speed do. Whether or not they're going to be able to get there, my biggest question that I have about this team. Let's talk about what we're watching the first month of the season with the Seahawks. What do you got for me, Derek?
Yeah, so I think the Seattle Seahawks defense is going to be really good, kind of regardless of what they get from this player. But I am very curious to see what they actually get out of Nick Emenwari. Like, it seems like they want him to be their slot, like big nickel type. It's just to me, it's like I still don't love that because it means that Witherspoon is going to be playing outside, which I don't love. But then also at the same time, I would not want Emenwari playing like a true safety role. So I'm just curious, like, how much do they actually put him on the field? Do they get to a point where, like with Kyle Hamilton, 8 weeks into the season, they're like, actually, we want him a little bit deeper? Like, I'm just very curious to see what they want to actually do with him.
It does seem like the nickel plan is the plan. I mean, he played nickel on 20 of 24 of his defensive snaps in the preseason. And I think going back to what we were talking about with Mike McDonald at the top, limiting risk. You limit risk by playing your young rookie closer to the ball than having him be the last line of defense. And Kyle Hamilton is a superstar level player now. We remember what those first 4 to 6 games looked like with the Ravens in Kyle Hamilton's rookie year when he was playing mostly safety. And I think that's probably the argument for why they're keeping his scope pretty narrow right now and really just asking him to focus on that. But I think part of the reason they want him there and part of the reason they sought him out is that this is a team that, in my opinion, wants to play nickel to everything. I don't think they want to have to put base defense on the field. And the teams that are capably able to do that are the ones that have these big nickel players who you can just leave out there all the time. Your Cooper DeJeans, people like that. Teron Johnson is not a big nickel guy, but he can hold up in those looks. So I think that's the vision. And if you look at the numbers last year, the Seahawks against the pass were bottom 8 in success rate when playing base. They were top 8 in success rate when playing nickel. And I just don't think they want to be in a spot where they ever have to put base defense on the field. And the hope is that Emenwari allows them to do that. I don't think that means he's the full-time nickel because I do still think that, like you said, you want to put Spoon in those positions because he's so dynamic. But I think making sure you never have to have 3 linebackers on the field, that feels like the vision for Emenwari and what is the driving force behind it. Dave, what do you got for me? What are you watching the first month of the season for the Seahawks?
There was a time in my life where I would have stood on the table to defend DeMarcus Lawrence as one of the more underrated ends in the league. Like earlier in his career, didn't get as much pub. He's not a double-digit sack kind of guy, at least not when he's fighting through a franchise tag situation, but does the dirty work, great run defender, can chip in 6 to 8 sacks, plays with physicality. He was a very underrated player for a large swath of his career. I'm not convinced that that's still the case. I mean, it's 2025 at this point. DeMarcus Lawrence is 33 years old. He didn't sign like the biggest deal in the world. And from what I can gather, the Seahawks structured it in a smart way. It's like a 3-year, $30 million deal, but 18 million of it is guaranteed. They can get out of this like after a year if it seems like the game has passed DeMarcus Lawrence by. But that's the big question for me. He's 33. He had a Liz Frank injury last year, basically didn't have a season. Obviously got, he got relegated to second tier status when Micah Parsons blew up a few years ago. And now he's looking for a restart at the age of 33 in Seattle. I'm just curious to see, is he anything like the guy from, we'll say 2018 to 2022? Yeah, and he was pretty good in 2023 as well. What's left in the tank? Because if something's there, again, that's super fun for the Seahawks pass rush. It's great for their run defense. It's just another guy Mike McDonald can use in a lot of ways. You can probably kick him inside at times if you want to. If there's not a whole lot there, then $18 million, like, all right, we'll find our answer to this next year. So I'm just curious to see what he looks like at this stage of his career.
And why I think that's particularly important to mention is that they didn't pay him a ton, but it was like the move they made in free agency. It was the only thing they did, and they're carrying about $76 million in dead money this year. They spent a ton of cash on the Darnold contract, and so they didn't really they weren't very aggressive in the market this year. That was what they did, and the opportunity costs with doing that instead of trying to seek out like a mid-tier guard in free agency and helping fortify that area. That's why they need this to work, because this is the one thing they did with the money.
To go back to my point, and I get it, like you're probably not finding great offensive line play for a bargain in free agency, but in March, I was like, we're signing 33-year-old edge rushers instead of trying to fix this offensive line, and maybe Gray Zabel will mitigate that and make it a moot point, but yeah, I do remember feeling puzzled by that when it happened.
So the only reason I kind of like it actually is like, would signing a mid-tier guard have made the offense good enough to that's what wins Seattle games? I don't think so. But I do think making sure McDonald has enough pass rushers to do what he wants to do on defense is how they can win games. So I'm kind of okay with it.
I don't disagree with that, but this is the bet you made. And so you better hope that the bet works out.
Yeah.
That being the vision where it's like, we're going to have the scheme lifted. We've drafted enough of these guys in the middle rounds, your Anthony Bradfords, your Christian Hayneses. Like, we're going to just see what we have in those guys, and we're going to hope that the system change on offense allows us to find one guy among that group, combined with Zabel. That's the plan. This is the best way to use this money because this is the best player available. That's fine. But if that bet doesn't work out, and that's how you decided to spend your limited free agent money outside of the Darnold contract, eventually you have to pay for that. And so that's my only concern. It's like a swing point in a way. It's like, this is what you've done with the money. And so I'm fine kind of framing it this way. When I'm watching the first month of the season, who are the dudes going to be on this team?
I mean, who are they right now? It's kind of just Leonard, right? Like, it's kind of just Leonard Williams, at times Devin Witherspoon, but again, he's playing outside when his best stuff was in the nickel.
I'm willing to call JSN a dude, or at least I'm that confident that he will be.
I'm fine with that, and I do believe he is on the short list of the guys who can become that. Like, where are the holy players going to be on this team? I think Leonard Williams was that last year. I think we've seen flashes of that with Witherspoon. I think the JSN, I really, really like JSN, and I'm excited to see what he can do as like the true focal point of the passing game. Is that it? Is Zabel going to be one of those guys? Do one of the tackles take a step forward in a new offensive system with Abe Lucas being healthy? AJ Barner is somebody that they really like as like an alpha kind of tone setter on the offense. I don't think his numbers will ever be crazy, but when we think about the difference makers on the Seahawks, teams that run the ball well, let's do it this way. Teams that run the ball poorly have blocking tight ends almost exclusively. He is not that. Like, he is, I do think in a better situation, he's going to be somebody that people notice more because of the way they're running the ball. But how many of those guys do you find over the course of this year? Is Byron Murphy one of those guys for you? Does Emanwari become one of those guys for you? Because I do think the floor of this team, talent-wise, is pretty high. Who raises the ceiling by the midpoint of this season? That, to me, might be the biggest question I have, period, about this team.
Probably. If you said it, I'm sorry. Did you say Reek Woolen? I mean, that's at least worth.
But it's
Potentially
year
week 1.
4. Like, are
Yeah,
we betting on
but,
that happening?
hey, contract year, baby. Let's go.
I guess that's true.
If they can get 3, 4, 5 of the guys from that list to like take a significant step forward, and we have some of those dudes on this team by the end, I do think the collective floor outside of that might be enough for them to be a playoff team. But I think it's going to have to happen. I think we're going to have to see a couple of those guys take that step in order for them to realize it. Speaking of, what is success, Dave, for the 2025 Seattle Seahawks?
Can tell I moved to Chicago because I got Notre Dame on the brain. But what I want the Seattle Seahawks to do more than anything is wake up the echoes of the Legion of Boom. Make me think of those Seattle teams. I have vivid memories, Robert, and we started covering the league right around the same time, like 11, 12 probably. I have memories of like I would be in a hotel getting ready to go to a game, and I would like turn on the TV and Seattle's on my TV, and I'm like, holy they did what? Who are these guys? Who's this Richard Sherman fella? They beat the out of who? That's what I want from the Seahawks. And I don't need them. Obviously, the Legion of Boom got to such a crazy height. I don't need them to be that. I don't need them to be arguably the best defense of the modern era. But win games with your defense. Like, be at the front of the recap shows because of something that the defense did. Like, I want Spoon and Reek and like all these guys, DeMarcus Lawrence, Byron Murphy. I want them like celebrating in the end zone after something crazy that they did, and like being a unit that's gonna lead the team. And if they do that, then the win-loss success will come.
Yeah,
I do think they have those personalities on defense. I think Spoon is at
Yes.
the center of that, but I do think that at least they have that level of energy on defense. Whether it comes to fruition is the question.
To me, in like a kind of abstract way, like I think it's just like, yeah, the defense continues winning, and then there's proof of concept on the offense. So like that to me is like you kind of have the season that Denver had last year. And obviously that was a little bit different in terms of like have the feeling of it because it was rookie quarterback instead of like paying Sam Darnold whatever you paid him. But if your defense is top 5 and winning you games week in and out, and then the offense, maybe it's not perfect, but there's proof of concept and then reason to believe going forward, and then we start talking about them the way that we're talking about Denver this time next year, that is success to me.
Yeah, if Sam Darnold is an afterthought because the defense is that good, that would be really fun.
Yeah, I think becoming one of those defenses, proving that your experiment with the offensive system and tapping into this version of it was correct, and establishing like 4 or 5 dudes you can really build around moving forward, that I think almost accidentally makes you a team pushing for the playoffs. And so the win-loss record is less important here, but I think those are the components to me that qualify as success for the Seahawks team.
I will throw in the caveat. Geno Smith never had a losing record, and we don't have to relitigate the decision to trade him. And maybe it was time for a change of scenery for everybody, but Geno Smith got the Seahawks to a winning record. So I don't think it's unreasonable. Like if you went down this path, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they could at least go 9-8.
Thanks for watching The Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.